We are going to again start today with either what we will call the Fetterman Fight or the Fetterman Massacre. And just taking you back again, remember on December 6th of 1866, a wood train was under attack by hostile Indians. Colonel Carrington sent a military force to relieve that wood train, and they barely got back alive because they went over the Lodge Trail Ridge, which was a very vulnerable area that would lead you to assault. And Carrington at that time made the decision that no longer would soldiers go over that ridge, okay? So, with the December 6th skirmish in mind, the Indians realized that the only way they're going to be able to kill all these soldiers they hate so much is to lure them out of the fort. So on December 21st of 1866, these lookouts on top of Pilot's Knob signaled down with their flags that another wood train is under assault by Indian warriors. Now, Captain William Fetterman approaches Colonel Carrington, and he requests that he lead his men against these Indian warriors that were assaulting the wood train. So when the signal comes down, Captain William Fetterman approaches Colonel Carrington and says, I request that I take my men out to relieve the wood train. And Carrington grants Captain Fetterman's wish. He allows him to take the duty. So Colonel Carrington grants Captain Fetterman's wish, and as a result of this, Fetterman is going to lead 81 men out of the gates of Fort Phil Kearny. So again, Captain William Fetterman goes to Colonel Henry Carrington and says, I would like to request the duty of relieving the wood train with my men. Carrington agrees to that, and as a result, Captain Fetterman leads 81 men out of the gates of Fort Phil Kearny. And I'm going to break down these men so you know exactly what he's got. He has 49 infantrymen with him. Okay, and those are soldiers that fight where? On foot. Okay, so he's got 49 infantrymen with him. He's got 27 cavalrymen that fight on horseback. Very good. 29 cavalrymen. Excuse me, 27. I'm sorry, 27. He's got the following officers with him. They're on your ID sheet. He's got Lieutenant George W. Grummond, and he's got Captain Frederick Brown. So he's got 49 infantrymen and 27 cavalrymen. And how many is that? 76. He's got Lieutenant George W. Grummond, 77. Captain Frederick Brown, 78. And 2 civilians, James Wheatley and Isaac Fisher, and himself, 81. 49 infantrymen, 27 cavalrymen, 2 officers, George W. Grummond, lieutenant, and Captain Frederick Brown, and 2 civilians, James Wheatley and Isaac Fisher, and himself. That's the 81 men that Captain William Fetterman marches out of the gates of Fort Phil Kearny on December 21st, 1866. Before he left, do you think he got orders from Carrington? Yep, and I want you to write these orders down word for word. Here are the orders that Carrington gave Fetterman. Quote, relieve the wood train from Indian attack. Relieve the wood train from Indian attack. Comma. Relieve the wood train from Indian attack, comma. But do not pursue the enemy beyond Lodge Trail Ridge. Quote, relieve the wood train from Indian attack, comma, but do not pursue the enemy beyond Lodge Trail Ridge. Very clear orders. Relieve the wood train from Indian attack, but do not pursue the enemy beyond Lodge Trail Ridge. It was witnessed that Colonel Carrington repeated those exact orders no less than 3 times to Captain Fetterman before he left. He repeated those orders no less than 3 times. So it was very clear, right? Cesar, relieve the wood train, but do not pursue the enemy past Lodge Trail Ridge. He ordered that and repeated it at least 3 times. I'll tell you a little bit about Captain Fetterman before we go on. A little arrogant, a little bit of an arrogant fellow. And this is what he once said. I'm not making this up. He said this: "Give me 80 men and I will ride through the entire Sioux Nation." That's what he said. Give me 80 men and I will ride through the entire Sioux Nation. Give me 80 men and I will ride through the entire Sioux Nation. I'll tell you how prophetic that statement was. Shannon D. Smith wrote a book entitled "Give Me 80 Men," which talks about the Fetterman fight. So he said, "Give me 80 men and I will ride through the entire Sioux Nation." That's how arrogant he was. So you can probably tell what's going to happen. Captain Fetterman departs from Fort Phil Kearny at 11:15 a.m. These timelines are very important, so get them down. Remember, this is an open note test. Okay, Captain Fetterman's departure from Fort Phil Kearny was 11:15 a.m. on December 21st, 1866. These timelines are very important. And remember again that you are able to use your notes. So Captain Fetterman departs from Fort Phil Kearny at 11:15 a.m. Now, to be honest with you, the full story of what happened from this point on is somewhat of a guess, because nobody returns to tell the story. All you have is Indian accounts. Okay? Just like, kind of like the Battle of the Little Bighorn, right? The full story from this point on, we're just going on historic research. Well, Captain Fetterman and his men relieved the wood train with really no problems, because they're being what? Set up, right? So they don't have any trouble relieving this wood train, the reason they went out there. And after Captain Fetterman and the men relieve the wood train, they ride to the crest of Lodge Trail Ridge. They don't go over, but they get to the top of it. And it's 11:45 a.m. Takes them a half hour to relieve the wood train and get to the top of Lodge Trail Ridge. They're at the top, the crest. They have not gone over. They have not disobeyed any orders. 11:45. So it took them 30 minutes from 11:15 to 11:45 to relieve the wood train and get themselves positioned on the top of Lodge Trail Ridge. Okay? Now this is kind of a great, I'm not making this up. Down in that valley that they see from the top of the ridge, they see Sioux Chief Crazy Horse and 7 warriors. They see Sioux Chief Crazy Horse and 7 warriors. And what's the job of these 8 Indians? What are they doing? They're trying to bait Fetterman to do what? Come over Lodge Trail Ridge. Okay? So the whole purpose of Sioux Chief Crazy Horse and these 7 warriors is to serve as decoys and try to bait Captain Fetterman, try to push him to advance his men over the ridge. And here are the 4 things they do in their attempt to bait him over the ridge. You might enjoy these. You might be surprised. You know the first thing they do? They curse at Fetterman's men. Curse at them. make you kind of mad. Somebody starts cursing at you, right? That's the whole point, right? So they begin to curse. Second thing they do is they start to give Fetterman and his men certain hand gestures. True story. Start giving them the old hand gestures. Even back in those days, certain things meant certain things, right? So they give the soldiers various hand gestures. Anybody want to guess what they did next?
Yes, show them their butt.
What? What did you say?
Show them their butt.
That's exactly right. They turn and moon. Honest to God. They turn and moon Fetterman and his soldiers. That avoid, Donovan. I knew it cut your disgusting thought process and come to fruition. Yep, the decoys mooned these soldiers. Honestly, they did. Now, that's been pretty well documented through history. Now, according to the Indian account, Crazy Horse even built a fire just out of the range of the soldiers' weapons and warmed his hands and looked up back at him. So those are the things that these decoys did. Now, it's pretty well documented that they cursed at him, that they gave him various hand gestures and mooned him. But the Indian story is, on top of that, they also, Crazy Horse went just out of the reach of the soldiers' rifles from Lodge Trail Ridge and built a fire and warmed his hands. Warmed his hands. He might have warmed that too. It is December. Anyway.
Oh my.
Sorry. A little slippage of tongue there. Anyway, he warmed his hands and baited him over that way. Well, Fetterman was arrogant and he was aggravated and he couldn't take any more, and he took his men over Lodge Trail Ridge in pursuit of those 8 Indian decoys.
Wow.
Takes them over the ridge. Falls into the trap. Well, where are these? Where are these Indians located in the valley? Right over the ridge? Oh no, they're at the far end of the valley by Pino Creek. They are trying to get them down in there, okay? Well, picture this in your mind. Once that infantry, cavalry, those officers and civilians were deep into that valley, approximately 2,000 Sioux warriors, Cheyenne warriors, and Arapaho warriors waited in ambush, hiding in the ravines and hiding behind anything they could. Couldn't see them from the top. All they could see was the 8 decoys. And as soon as they got themselves down in the middle of the valley, waiting in ambush is about 2,000 Sioux Indians, Cheyenne Indians, and Arapaho warriors. Well, as they get down into that valley, they are attacked from all sides. And Captain Fetterman's command becomes sitting ducks, and they retreat back up the valley floor, trying to get back up to what? That high ground. They are in bad shape here. They get in there, the ravines, the ground just opens up, basically, with Indian warriors, and they are in a bad position. And he does everything he can to get back through the valley and up to the high ground. Now listen carefully so you understand this, and again you're using your notes. The infantry were the first to fall back to Lodge Trail Ridge. The infantry were the first to fall back, and they were under constant Indian assault from both ridges with bows and arrows. So they're the first one to come back, which tells you they were kind of the last ones, right, to go over. So, the infantry are the first to fall back towards Lodge Trail Ridge, and they're under constant Indian assault from both the ridges and anything these Indians can be from behind. And they're all being used with bow and arrow. Okay? We're recording this, so this is good. You're going to want to watch it. Now, the Indians did suffer casualties, but you know what 99% of their casualties came from?
Friendly fire.
friendly fire because they're firing from the ridges and they're actually shooting arrows into themselves a little bit. I mean, they've got these guys totally surrounded. So the Indians did suffer casualties as a result of friendly fire, as arrows meant to hit soldiers as they retreated back up the valley were fired high, hitting other Indians. Now, what you're seeing is the cavalry retreating and then the infantry retreating, right? And I can't even imagine what this was like because they had no chance, okay? Well, way up in the front of the battle, farthest away from Lodge Trail Ridge, were the two civilians, Wheatley and Fisher. They were the farthest ones out. And I can tell you, without being there and no witnesses to see it, that those particular men were with 3 enlisted men. There were 5 of them there. And they fought desperately against these Indian warriors, but they were soon overrun and killed. So at the very end of the valley, in the worst possible spot to be in, the farthest from Lodge Trail Ridge, or the high ground, were 2 civilians, James Wheatley and Isaac Fisher, and 3 enlisted men, or infantrymen. And they fought hard for a long period of time before they were overcome. How would I know that? How do I know that? Not the Indian account. How would I know they fought like crazy before they were killed? What?
Witnesses.
Oh, good guess. This is really kind of interesting. How would I know that?
From the witnesses from the fort.
No?
No.
No? What? How does anybody know they fought desperately against those guys?
Because they lived.
No, they died. They killed them
Because,
all.
I mean,
Kill them
like,
all.
who wouldn't fight us?
Probably many
Oh,
year old.
they might have found
Yeah,
a lot
but you can't
of
guess.
casings or something by
If you-
it?
What's that?
Like found a lot of casings by it?
Wonderful.
They found what?
Wheatley and Fisher were later identified because they were the only ones using Henry repeating rifles. They were the only men with that weapon, and they found piles of Henry rifle cartridges in the area in which they fell. So you know they fought desperately because they used I don't know how many hundreds of cartridges trying to save their life. They also found over 60 blood spots in that area. Now, you know how many arrows both Wheatley and Fisher had in their bodies when they were discovered? Over 100 each.
That's what I wondered.
Over 100 each.
Yeah, they would have a lot of room.
So, over 100 each. They were shot 100 times each with arrows. Had arrows, 100 arrows in them. Now that's just rubbing it in, or making sure if you face these guys in the afterlife that they were at a huge disadvantage. Both men were found with over 100 arrows embedded in their bodies. That's incredible. So, they're really the first group hit, are they not? So we're going to back up and see who's next. Now I will say this before I go on. If you go there, it's not that far. If you get a chance, God, go see Fort Phil Kearny. There's no fort there. It's just your imagination, and they'll give you a tour of what it looked like. But they'll take you to the Fetterman fight, and you can walk from Lodge Trail Ridge all the way into the valley, and you can go all the way to the Pino Creek and see 2 rocks where somebody carved the names of Wheatley and Fisher in the rocks. It's really cool. And you can see exactly where they fell. Now, picture this. We're in the valley, okay? So I'll try to draw something. We're in this valley, right? And here's the ridge. And here's Wheatley and Fisher and those other guys. They're all killed there. And the cavalry was the first one to come back, right? So who do you have here?
That was the infantry.
Or excuse me, no, did I say infantry or cavalry?
The infantry was the first to fall back, he said.
Just a second. The infantry, yeah. The infantry, sorry, was the first one. So who's the next in line to be knocked around a little bit?
Cavalry.
The cavalry, okay. Okay, so after Wheatley, Fisher, and the 3 enlisted men were killed or were being assaulted, the next group that are going to be hit by the Indian warriors were Lieutenant George W. Grumman and the cavalry. He was leading the cavalry, Grumman. Well, what happens is Grumman and the cavalry form a defense line about halfway in the valley. Okay? Near, and it's still there, near a lone tree. Tree's still there. So Lieutenant Grumman's command, his cavalry form a defense line about halfway up the valley near a lone tree where most of them met their death at the hands of those Indian warriors. Okay? How would they know that? Found cartridges. Okay? By the lone tree. Now, three of them, including Lieutenant Grumman, were found back up the valley a short distance from the rest. So they must have tried to make a break from the tree, I'm guessing. I'm guessing the two cavalrymen said, hey, Lieutenant, let's go, try to get him out of there. And they were found maybe 50 yards away from the tree in the middle of the valley floor. Okay? So, the last ones are going to be Captain Fetterman and the rest of the infantry. Okay? Right? Because they took off first, right? Well, Captain Fetterman and the infantrymen are not going to make it to Lodge Trail Ridge. They get fairly close, but they're not going to get there. They're about a half mile from where the cavalry were killed. So this is a pretty long valley that they were in. So Fetterman and his infantrymen were surrounded and killed closer to Lodge Trail Ridge, about a half mile.